And so yeah, so happy October. Hard to believe it's already October 12th. And as we were just saying right before getting on with the rest of you, what an exciting October to be here in Philly. I see a Phillies hat, so that's right, that's right. I imagine that the games will be on, and very exciting to have the Phillies and also the Eagles. So definitely exciting times for us for sure. Um, so let me just jump to our agenda for tonight. There we go. So I'm going to start with some announcements in just a couple minutes. And then tonight we're going to really start talking about trauma-informed educators. At our kickoff meeting, I know Trent kind of gave a little overview of some of the things that we've been working on all summer, to really try to make direct links between trauma-informed practices, and you know what we know that you as educators need on a regular basis, as well as connecting it to the curriculum of Writers Matter and how we can help make some of those direct connections from that to the exercises that we're doing in the class. We're going to spend some time just checking in with everyone, hearing from each other how you've gotten the year started, what you're doing as far as Writers Matter is going in your classrooms, and also if you have any advice or if you need help with something. So just a collection of sharing, and then we'll get into some trauma-informed practices for both ourselves and then also for our students. And that should pretty much take us through our evening. So couple first announcements. So one thing we wanted to let you all know is that we do have funding for after school programs. So if anyone out there, whether you're a school that's been a part of the program for years or you're a brand new school, if you think you might be interested in doing an after school program, we have special funding set aside for that. We will provide a stipend for any teacher. So, you know, however many hours you would hold it each week, we would pay you a stipend for the hours that you're working. And we can also provide some support if there's materials or snack or things like that that you might need for your after school program. So think about it. And if that's something that you might be interested in, you could let us know in the chat, or you could let us know in an email. And, you know, essentially what we want you to do is just tell us what you have in mind for your after school writing program, and give us an estimate of the cost. And then we'll get back to you, you know, if we can approve it. A lot of people have, you know, really just used the Writers Matter program with the after school, maybe taking a lot of the lessons a little more in depth, spending more time on them. Other people have done like a poetry group for an after school program, using some of the ideas from Writers Matter, but then, you know, adding some things into it. We've had other teachers where they created a magazine for the school as a collection of student writing. But, you know, we know that some of these kids, you know, really have some extra time on their hands, and having some opportunities for them to engage in additional work can sometimes be a really big asset to them. So think it over. And if you want to hear from people that have done after school programs, we could, you know, connect you with somebody to mentor you through that. Those of you that are teacher leaders in this group, I just want to let you know that I will be sending out the September report, and we'll ask that you take some time over the next couple days to fill that in. I'll also put it in the chat on this call, but then I'll follow up with an email as well. So each month we ask that you fill out that report, which just gives us an idea of who's participating at your school, what you all are doing, how far you're coming, and also ways that we can continue to support you. So be on the lookout for that, and please do get those done as quickly as you can. And then finally, the last announcement is that we are going to be engaging in, we're calling it an assessment, but it's not so much an assessment of the program. For those of you that have been part of Writers Matter for a long time, we started one back in 2019, and then pretty much all the progress that we made got cut off as 2020 approached and the pandemic hit, and we weren't really able to finish up what we were doing. So Leslie has joined us this year, and she is going to help us really to just do an assessment of the program so that we can share that information with our funders. So I want to give Leslie a minute to just introduce herself so that if you see her coming by or she reaches out to you, you know who she is, and she can tell you a little bit about what she's planning to do. So Leslie, go ahead.
Okay, very nice to meet everyone. And I've sat through a number of your programs since I've been working with Bob for goodness knows how long. I was fortunate to teach both of his children when I was teaching, and now have been working in the Writers Matter Interfaith program, which ran for 3 years and then hit a bump when the pandemic came. So I'm very familiar with the Writers Matter curriculum, and look forward to working with all of you as I do observations and some ethnographic work, which will involve interviews with you, with your teams, and with some of your students. And so now you know what the face looks like when we get to meet one another.
Thank you, Leslie. And one other announcement too is we do have Andre here, and he is excited to start coming out to your schools and working with your students. I have had some schools already reach out to us that would like to connect with Andre and have him come out. I know many of you sometimes have Andre towards the end of the year as a celebration, but don't forget, he can certainly come out, more than once, and maybe bringing him out towards the beginning of the year might be a great way to inspire and get your kids really excited to kick off the year with Writers Matter. So Andre is on the call right now. If you want to even chat with him directly while we're here, you can do that. Or again, you can send him an email directly, or email Bob or I or Trent, and we can get you connected with Andre that way as well. So Andre, anything you want to say in addition to that?
I'm sorry, I'm terrible working this. My thing was on mute. If anyone have any questions or anything, they can feel free to talk to me on here or email me or call me, anything. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Andre. And you will very soon see on our website, we'll send around an announcement. But Andre and Will have worked hard putting together a collection of all of our Writers Matter winners. So we have the video that was already created that was kind of a snippet of the work that Andre did with our winners, but now we have all of the entries that were submitted, and so that will be up on our website, an opportunity for parents to see what their children submitted, and for you to be able to share with your classes, and sometimes it's pretty cool to see that you're out there on the internet. So be on the lookout for that. It's very exciting. Okay, so let me see. All right, so Trent, I will turn it over to you to get us started tonight.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Happy Wednesday, halfway through this week. We have some nice weather, so hopefully you've enjoyed that, and we can get out and enjoy after we're done too. But we want to take some time to think about and talk about taking care of ourselves, taking care of yourself. So the first question that we're going to ask you, and we're going to expand on it in a second, is what do you like to do? So you can just kind of start thinking about that now. What do you like to do? Right, because we all know, and if you agree with this, you can give me like an emoji, a hand clap. But this is tough work that we're all doing. We're engaging in. We're working with students, whether it's public, private, Catholic. Working with students is tough work. Delivering instruction is tough work. meeting all the needs of families while meeting the standards. It's tough work. The social emotional labor is tough work. So only Carl and Tracy agree with that. Everyone else is like, this is just really easy. Because if so, I can, we can end it now, I guess. But if you agree, yeah, okay, Ms. Mullen agrees. And no pressure. If you're doing really well, that's also a great thing. So I'm really just joking. But this is generally pretty tough work that we get thrown into and that we willingly jump into. But this is just going to be a reminder to take care of ourselves and to be able to separate the day-to-day, our day-to-day life from the work that we're doing with our students. And you can go to the next slide, Kim. Because really, and what this says, and this is a little bit more wordy than I would, generally tend to be on a slide, but I don't know if you've ever heard this analogy on the airplane. It gets overused actually, but the analogy that you have to put your face mask on, or not your face mask, your oxygen mask on first if there's an issue that happens on a plane before you help your children, before you help your partner or anyone else nearby. It's the same idea that I actually would tell a lot of teachers that I used to work with when teaching students with emotional disabilities, is that you can't jump in the pool and try to help somebody who's drowning if you don't know how to swim, or if you don't have an extra life vest, or if you yourself are in need. So really, it's just an important reminder to step back from before we jump into the rest of the school year or even the rest of this month. And when the demands continue to kick in and back to school nights have happened, but then you have parent teacher conferences and everything else that's going to come up pretty soon. Make sure that you take care of yourself and you're prepared and you are intentionally doing things to keep yourself fresh as the year progresses. So the activity we're going to do next, and then Kim, you can jump ahead. Is we're going to take some time, intentional time right now until about 4:55, or maybe a little bit less. I want us to come up with a list of 10 things that we like to do for fun. So like really take some time to think about it. And if you are able to write it down, so you have a list that you can check back with. All right, once you finish your list, you can go ahead and throw your number one thing in the chat so we can kind of see where you are. So if you feel the number one thing that you feel comfortable sharing, you can put it in our group chat. We have reading, spending time outside, watching tennis, another one for reading, hit the beach, dance, exercise, a lot of reading. This is a well-read group, makes sense. Knitting, fancy restaurant, take walks, play with the dogs, scuba diving, nice. Exploring the city, another more for reading. Okay, great. It looks like we've had time to finish our list. Build World War II models. Nice. read and sit on the beach. Okay, great. So this is just something that we're going to hold on to for now. Like, we're not going to do anything with it quite yet. We will come back to it, so keep the list handy. If you want, you can go back and add or kind of change things in and out, but try to get at least 10 things down if you can. And then Kim, you can hit the next slide.
So you
The next, and
go ahead.
the next thing we're going to talk about now is just really kind of checking in on how we're doing with Writers Matter in the classroom. So have you gotten to have you gotten started so far this semester? What lessons have you taught, and what advice do you have, or what help do you need? So we can do this in smaller groups. I know we talked about doing breakout rooms, Kim. So let's break out into in smaller groups, but make sure you like take a picture of the questions, and I can also throw them in the chat if that helps too. But the questions are: have you gotten started yet this semester, this year with Writers Matter? What lessons have you taught, and what advice do you need, or what help can you provide to others? So we're going to talk about this in our smaller rooms.
Okay, and so as we go into our breakout rooms, just a reminder that we have a lot of teachers here that have been doing this program for a long time, and we have some brand new teachers that are new. So, you know, those of you that have been doing this, you know, please see what our new people need and offer some advice and suggestions, you know, especially sometimes when it's your first year trying to, you know, how do we get it started? How do we bring up these topics and talk about these things in the classroom? So, you know, definitely in your groups, share some of those ideas and suggestions that you have with the people in your group. So we'll take about, let me see, where are we at with time? I'm thinking about 10 to 15 minutes in our breakout rooms. I'll send a message around when we're about to close them, but, you know, really use this time, and then we'll share out as a whole group so that we can collectively get some more ideas. Okay, so I just created those breakout rooms, and you should be able to move into those now.
I forgot to
Sarah,
put
I'm
in the
not
chat,
sure
so I'm
if,
just going to broadcast the questions.
yeah. Sarah, are you there? I'm not sure if you see your breakout room or. Sarah, are you with us? All right, maybe, Okay, so I think we're all back together, and I thought before we moved on that maybe we could have some groups share some of the things that they talked about in their groups, any advice they have, something that, you know, an aha that came up, or something that was a good idea. And I'll start by volunteering the group that I was just in, because Crystal was sharing some awesome things with us. And so Crystal, would you mind sharing some of what you've been doing in your class?
Sure. I do mini lessons on Fridays. So we started off with brainstorming for I am froms, and then we went into writing. And one of the things we talked about was something called pitchforks. It's a way to add details to your writing, and it can add 3 nouns, 3 verbs, like prepositional phrases. So some of the lines that they wrote are: I am from the midst of fantasy battles, from sword fights, from writing the words that leap off the page was one of them. I am from towering trees, cooling fall breezes, and watching shining sunsets. One of my girls wrote for her first line: I am from a household of cup-sized D-bras with dirty makeup brushes and red lipstick that stains for days on bathroom counters and Haitian Creole spoken with rice and beans on the table.
Oh, that's awesome.
Did you want me to keep going? Or
I mean, anything, I mean, how did you get them to write like that? Like, that's awesome. Like, any suggestions, or was it just from that one lesson that built from?
It was pretty much that from that one writing that lesson on pitchforks and how to use them. There's a cute little video on YouTube if you look up pitchforks ELA that we watched, and then we just did some practice sentences together just to build those that kind of structure of adding lots and lots of details to our sentences.
Awesome, thank you. How about from group 2? Or any group that wants to share. Maybe you don't even know what group number you were.
Can I go real quick because I gotta sign out and then I gotta sign back on in my car. So,
Please do.
all right, cool. So group 1, I loved ours group because of different variety. Like we have Michaela, and I am so sorry if I'm forgetting. There's a lot of names. There was Tina, Bridget, and it was well, Tracy, of course. She's one of the older ones like me. But it was, I'm so sorry, I can't see where you are right now. But anyway, we were just sharing how you know, just getting, we're all using pretty much the right one of I am, or the one that we're all using is I am from, and we're just building on our community. We were just sharing how, you know, we just use our time to build the community, and this is like the way of doing it. We do our morning meetings, and then through our morning meetings, we're channeling and getting ideas from people. So what I tend to do is I'll model my I am from, and I'll always include things like, oh yeah, I usually sometimes I'll even read it, and we do a me too. So if there's certain things that we're saying or I'm reading off, then they'll do a me too, like that's them. And we do that throughout all of our meetings whenever we're having like the topic of the day or question of the day in our morning meetings. And it's just a way of making sure that we hone in. A lot of people were mentioning that since it's the first year, we were just sharing with them, basically saying, you know, just set a date. Like, don't even like put it in the lesson plan. Like, that is definitely something that you want to do, because we're definitely building and we're making the connections all the time. But it's easier to say, well, I know this Friday, because we are constantly working on reading diagnostic for iReady or math diet, we're now going to take that moment just to do something completely different and unwind and allow the kids to be them and do it. So we've been talking about ways of trying to make sure that we're focused on doing it that way, and just coming up with strategies. Whereas Tracy had mentioned, once you do it something like on a Friday, then you can always incorporate like independent work throughout the week, the following week, to build on it before you come back to it again. So it's just like working out different strategies and knowing that, like you've always said, Kim, is it's all about how you do it. It's not, there is no set plan. There is no, every person does not need to be doing the same thing and coming up with the same way. It's just coming up with different strategies that will work for you and your class.
Well, thank you for that, Carl. Great advice. I love, you know, making that time for you after all the other stuff that you're doing. That will fit nicely into the next part of the meeting today. I just realized I was room 2, so Crystal had already shared. So how about room 3? That's Kelly, Michelle, Francesca, and Maureen. Anyone from that group want to share?
I can share. There were 3 people from Henry in there, which was interesting because we were talking about, you know, just the different ways that we do it, and reflecting on what Carl said, it's different for each class. There were 2 lower school teachers, and then I'm an upper school social studies teacher. So just finding the ways to keep it fresh, and somebody should jump in to talk about what I'm missing, but we talked about ways to keep it fresh, because we do recycle the program and build on the program for many years at Henry. And so one teacher talked about utilizing it to make connections with the characters of the book that they're reading. Also building community, you know, and sharing with one another. And then I put the social studies spin on it, just different ways to keep it fresh. I also give the kids an opportunity to make art instead of writing, because I'm not teaching ELA, so I don't have to have a writing grade. And one of the teachers is also one of my students' moms, so she was able to share about her experience of it as a mom too. So that was fun.
Awesome, great advice. Thank you for that. And room 4, Danielle, Jenna, Joseph, Julie, Kellyanne, and Olivia. Is there anything you want to share from your group?
I jumped in late, Kim, but I was saying that a suggestion for, because a few people didn't know about, I was just saying how I use the reset. I started off the year using it for my morning meeting, the elementary version, skipped around or whatever. But how I went from like the heart, inside, outside, to the next like art piece, which goes with Francesca was talking about. I did the collage. So 100 things that they love or that make them happy. And then instead of just like using it for themselves, we did it also, like she mentioned, to use as community building and art as writing. So like they all laid it, we did a gallery walk, they laid it around on their desk, and everybody went around, and instead of saying like, I love, to their best friend, like this is great. They had to take stickies and they had to find one thing on each person's collage that they had a connection to or had something in common that they love. So we did that. And then, they can use that same as the heart to use as whatever, writing inspiration or blah, blah, blah. But one suggestion that to make for the website is, instead of just having the reset as PDFs, to have it as where it's prompted to make a copy, have it in Google Slides so that they have it ready, that they can use it on Google Classroom. So that's why it was in the chat for anyone that doesn't have it on Google Slides. It's in the chat, the elementary, but to maybe put the Google Slide version of all of it, but post it as a prompt to have everyone make a copy so that it goes right into everyone's individual drive as their own copy.
Great idea. Great idea. And Kellyanne, I'm glad you brought that up, because I noticed that in our group as well, they were talking about using the reset curriculum too. So for those that are new to the program, and I was telling our group, we created a reset curriculum in 2020, and then we created another one in 2021. And there's an elementary version and a middle school version, and they are both on our website, or all 4 of them are on our website under the materials for learning. So these are all slides already created for people to use with lessons built out. So feel free to pick and choose. Some of it is still extremely pertinent and fits really well. Some might be a little bit, I think it was like talking about wearing a mask and stuff. We're not obviously wearing masks like we once were, but, please definitely feel that you can pick and choose and utilize any of that. So, and kind of going along with what Francesca was saying, like keeping it fresh, like there's so many different ideas, and then you can always just, change them up a little bit. So, great ideas and suggestions there. So before we move on, just, for those of you that are new, does anyone have any questions or something that you'd like to hear from the collective group, or a challenge that you're facing with getting started, or how the materials work, or anything at all before we continue on?
I don't know if I'm doing it right, but I use the journals. The kids love the pens. So like, I'm trying to get them really, I guess, motivated, and they like writing with the pen. So they're using the journals, and I've given them the opportunity to, like I've told them they're not being graded on it. It can be whatever, response. But I was surprised when I told them, I'm like, if you want me to read your journal, just put it on my desk. And I got almost the entire stack from the whole class that they wanted to respond, or me to respond. And I did, and I wrote like a little sticky note, and they were really excited about that. So I need to do more, but I just don't have the time to read everything. So I'm kind of cheating as I go.
Well, I know, I don't think Aubrey's here tonight, and I'm sure other people have done this, but she's talked extensively about how she has done a lot of like response with them. And, sometimes you can kind of pick and choose how you do it, saying, hey, like I can respond to 5 a day, or, you know what I mean? Because you're right, you can't, you can't possibly write thoughtful response to every single student every single night. But, trying to figure out a system that might work for you, that that you could respond to, doing just like a couple at a time or something like that. But that's huge. That's really awesome that right off the bat they're excited for you to read their work. And I think them hearing that response probably will they'll continue to want you to read it, fortunately or unfortunately, right? Because that's motivating to them. So
It is definitely motivating. So.
yeah, that's great. And it is funny, like something about a pen and a journal. And I think they're fun journals. They're different than most of their other books look. And so, I think it's a nice place for them to be able to do the work, and knowing that it's a safe place for them to do the work. So
Kim, something my grade partner and I did with our journals was allowing the kids to go totally decorate front and back and use photographs, their own drawings. And that was like a whole period and a half just doing that. But it shows that the journal belongs to them. They cherish it more. They want to do things in it. So it worked for us.
I absolutely love that idea. And Joseph, I can tell you, teaching at the college level, both undergraduate and graduate, so anyone from 18 to 55, so many of them still have that journal from elementary school or middle school that became theirs, that and they bring them into me as an adult, like they hang on to it all those years later. So you have no idea what you might be inspiring by doing that. But great idea. And there's ideas on there that might inspire some of their writing, and really heavy. I mean, it's almost another way of doing inside outside of your heart, right? Because you're just doing it almost artistically by having them cut out pictures and drawings and things like that. So great suggestion. Anybody else? Okay, so Trent, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, great. So kind of switching back over to why trauma-informed educators. And Bob, if you want to jump in too, here you can. But this was really a response to a lot of what we see in the last 2+ years, but really since forever, but really going back to the reset curriculum that Kellyanne just mentioned that we worked on in 2020, when we really focused on being trauma-informed and really focusing on creating safety. And the next year we focused on building community and centering on joy. But even still to this day, we're still in the pandemic. We still have a lot of things that we're struggling through in the city. This gun violence is still continuing to increase. Bob asked about ways that we can support or ways that we can respond to really the gun violence that's been happening, that we are having to, that's coming to our doors as educators in a lot of ways. That's been there since, for quite a while, but it's definitely feels like it's increasing a lot in the last few years, as well as just dealing with the unresolved trauma that may have existed or may have been exacerbated during the pandemic, during those several years of being at home, or during those years of being, in isolation. So part of what we wanted to do, and again, Bob, if you wanted to chime in and add anything else there too, you can.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we, I'm really interested in hearing some of the voices of the kids that have been experiencing this gun violence in so many different ways. I mean, some of them have actually seen things, some of them have friends, relatives, whatever. And I think there's a lot of potential writing that we could provide and provide opportunities for these kids to vent. So I'm going to be working with Andre also. We're going to try to get the kids to think more about this as well. But I have a little bit of a mixed feeling about trying to encourage them to talk about something, because Writers Matters is all about talking about whatever they want to talk about and write about. So, if you have some ideas or suggestions or some feelings about this, I just think it's so present right now, and it's so important, and I think we need to at least provide that opportunity in ways that you feel as a teacher is the best way to do this. So if you want to chime in at all, we would appreciate it, because I know it's delicate.
Thanks, Bob. And then partly our response was to really focus on ways to support you all as educators, as the implementers of the Writers Matter approach. We know that based on your feedback in the past several years too, that classroom management, classroom behavior, working with students that have had disruptive episodes, and just dealing with a lot of things in your school building has come up a lot, and has come up as a roadblock, excuse me, to being able to really implement Writers Matter as successfully as you want. So part of what we're going to do this year in response to COVID, to gun violence, to just things like inflation and political divide and everything else that's going on that's impacting the child and impacting our schools and impacting our communities, we want to make sure that we kind of bring back, or just kind of recenter the trauma-informed practices that are already really embedded in Writers Matter, but just making sure that we name it for some of our newer members, and also just kind of just reminding us for those that have been here for the past few years. And something we're going to do is we're going to have a resource that's available with all these different terms that we're going to talk about each week, just so that you have it, so you're aware of it, so you can name it, and so you can also find support for your students and for yourself if you need it. But yeah, it's our responsibility to work with students. And a lot of times we are the front line for a lot of our students that are experiencing different traumatic events. So we just want to make sure that we're at least aware of some of the best practices that are out there. So before we do that, let's define trauma. There are about 1 million ways you can define trauma, so this is not exhaustive. This is not the only way that we can define trauma. But trauma is simply a term to describe the aftermath or impact of an event, whether real or perceived, that interrupts a person's ability to maintain a sense of psychological and physical safety and well-being. The key thing that I always highlight from this example, which comes from a textbook that is trauma-informed school practices. And it's a really good resource, and it's typically available digitally as well. So if anyone wants a copy of it, I think I have access to it and I can share it. But the big thing I like to pull out from this first definition is whether it's real or perceived. So when talking about all that we've experienced in the past, all the events that have happened in the past few years, and also forever, there's a reality and also a perception that can impact our students' ability to feel safe psychologically and physically, as well as ours, right? So I like to highlight that in that first term. The second term is a little bit more psychological of a definition, but it refers to a traumatic event. A traumatic event or situation creates psychological trauma when it overwhelms the individual's ability to cope, leaves that person fearing death, annihilation, mutilation, or psychosis. The individual may feel emotionally, cognitively, and physically overwhelmed. The circumstances of the event commonly include abuse of power, betrayal of trust, entrapment, helplessness, pain, confusion, and/or loss. All right, so this is another definition, but there's something that both these definitions have in common. Can anybody kind of pinpoint a commonality that they see? You can call it out, or you can throw it in the chat as well.
Brent, I'll just say that what stands out to me is how our experience of trauma impacts our literal thinking and experience of thinking. And so when we think about that as teachers, and we're asking our kids to learn, do, be, whatever, if they're dealing with traumas, we all know, because we've all dealt with trauma, how exhausted that is.
Yes. And that actually is like almost a great segue to a video that we're going to watch in 1 second. But Yeah, it affects, and that goes also to our last point too. Trauma impacts the entire person, the way that we think, learn, the way that we remember things. So it impacts our executive functioning, the way that we react to things, the way we feel about ourselves, the way that we feel about other people. So part of the reason why I've always kind of championed this program since I've heard about it, and I've championed it being trauma informed in a lot of ways, is because asking students to write about themselves, having journals that students can decorate, having a community where students can hear and share writing and hear and share their feelings and thoughts and their entire being in a safe way. It's something that I hear you all doing every week, and it's a part of our approach anyways. So when even responding to things like gun violence and other things that are going to continue to happen throughout the year, the program already is kind of built to be able to support students that are going through those different, experiencing those different events. All right, so something to keep in mind though with trauma is that key terms that you might hear here and other places are that you have an event, you have an experience, and you also have an effect. All right, so those are kind of like 3 E's that often get referred to in trauma-informed practices. And you see those 3 E's kind of pop up in these different definitions as well. But there's an event. How we experience that event makes a difference. So everyone experiences things differently, right? We all can have the same exact thing happen to us right now, but how we experience it would be very different. And how that affects us, whether right now or long-term, would also be very different. And that's why it's important to keep that in mind too when working with your students, because something might happen at your school today, and everyone in your class might experience that event very differently, and it might affect them very differently. A student might seem fine tomorrow, and then 3 weeks later have a reaction to what happened. It might be a delayed onset. So again, not that it's our job, unless we have any social workers or psychologists on the call, that's not our direct work and direct job to help students necessarily process and work through if they're going through an episode. But as we all know, we have students in our classroom all the time that shut down, put their heads down, refuse to write, cry, etc., that show effects of potential trauma. So it is our job to still educate that whole child when they're in our classroom. So I want to just kind of reinforce that. I know that this work that we're already doing, hopefully this can help us to understand what's happening. With that said, it's earlier in this statement, I didn't read it verbatim, but our hope is that we can continue to help everyone to be trauma informed in our approach. And I'm reading this from this bottom box, to have an anti-deficit lens and build on resilience and protective factors that our students already have. So when thinking about our students being resilient, our communities being resilient, everyone on this call is resilient in some way or another. If you've taught for the past however many years, even for past months or weeks, you have some attributes or characteristics that have helped you to overcome a potentially traumatic situation or event. So there's things about you, whether it's your ability to think and process, your ability to write really well or teach really well, or to create community in your classroom, or to have a network of people that support you. You have different characteristics and traits that can help you overcome different events. So do our students. Students also have protective factors, which is essentially similar to resilience, but it's more thinking about how there's people in the community. It could be you all on this call that help our students to be resilient in these moments, and help them and have characteristics about yourself, or about your school, about your classroom, that helps encourage our students to overcome these different events that they might face on a daily basis. And the anti-deficit approach, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, but it really kind of comes a lot of times from the disability studies movement, where it's a rejection of the medical model. Not that the medical model is bad, or not that we don't need medicine, and need a diagnosis of something that's going on within us. But it's the idea that when it comes to our students, really with disabilities and also without disabilities, right, the entire gambit, the problem doesn't solely rest within the individual. If I go to the doctor, my son is in daycare, he's sick every week. So, right, he had a fever today. If we take him to the doctor, they'll say he has an ear infection. He has whatever, hopefully nothing serious, right? But they'll diagnose him, give him some medicine, and that should be the trick that does it. But the reality is that that's not how we can treat our students, or not how we should treat our students, because we know there's a ton of factors that are going on outside of that student. So regardless of if they're trauma impacted, which again, not our job to define and to label, but say someone comes to us and tells us that, a school psychologist gives us a report or whatever, we know that the problem is not solely within that child. Things have happened all around them that have impacted them and kind of play a major role in how they respond and how they see the world. All right, so really it's just a way of thinking that hopefully I'm sure that most of you already have. But when thinking about issues, whether it's students not writing, students, arguing with each other, arguing with you, really it's the idea that we're going to push back this idea that these are problem children or they have problem behaviors. I mean, they can have problem behaviors, but the child itself are not the problem. All right, is that, y'all still with me? And hopefully this is like nothing new. And if it is something new, then great. And again, we're going to have these resources available so you can also refer to them later on. But with that said, this kind of goes to what Francesca was just mentioning. When Kim and I were planning and talking about today's session, Kim brought up something that I'll let you share so I don't mess it up.
Now you're gonna put me on the spot. I'm trying to think. What? Give me a hint of what it was.
You had a friend at a university that was a psychologist that said.
Oh, right. So we were actually at a soccer tournament over the weekend, and she was just saying she's a psychologist at University of Pennsylvania, and they have had to send more students to the hospital this year than they ever have with mental issues, that they're coming in and it's that, that scary, that far along, that it's not something that they can just talk through. It's something that they needed to, immediately address. And so, we were talking about how, we were just in survival mode, really, if you think about it, for the last couple of years, getting through the pandemic. And so in some ways we feel like, okay, things are getting back to normal. We're a little bit better than we once were, but almost the grief or the trauma or the reality of coming out of that survival mode and reflecting back on everything that I missed. So for our college students, it's, wait a minute, I really didn't have a high school graduation. I didn't really go to prom. I didn't have that time to play my sport that I love or do the play that I had worked so hard for. Like, these things are now actually becoming a little more present. And we could see that happening at all the grades because, they've all been impacted in some way or another. And so as we were talking about that, Trent thought immediately about this concept between the survival brain and the learning brain, and how, kids aren't really able to learn when they're in that survival mode. So.
Yeah, so thanks, Kim. It's really, I think it's something that I'm sure it makes sense to all of us in some way, just the idea that we were in such a survival mode, like a legit survival mode for at minimum a year. Like, I'm not sure how long your schools were on Zoom or how the different pandemic affected you where you were, but we were in a mode where we were not engaging in normal learning environments for quite a while. We still kind of are in some ways. We're coming out of it. So this is just a quick video that talks about how being in that survival mode can impact learning. Oh, let me actually make sure I'm sharing my sound. So I'm gonna leave this really quick. Stop sharing it. Share it again with sound. Okay, we're good.
About what's the best. Hey, welcome back. Today, I really wanted to think about what's the best way to teach teachers about trauma without getting them distracted with all the technical stuff, and what's the most important thing for them to understand and learn. And I thought that the best way to do it might be to just make a difference between a learning brain versus a brain in survival mode. So we'll just call it learning brain versus survival brain. And this is the difference. So learning brain is this brain that's open to learning new information, and it's completely okay with ambiguity and grays and vagueness, and it sees the big picture. It like pulls back and is on the balcony, can look over the forest and figure out what's going on. On an emotional level, people in learning brain feel calm, peaceful, maybe a little excited about what they're about to learn, maybe a little playful and having fun too, and definitely curious. And they're not afraid of making mistakes because it's just part of the learning process. And so they're not really thinking about themselves. And they actually feel a little bit of confidence that if they just apply themselves, they might pick up what they're trying to learn. Now, survival brain, on the other hand, is completely different. It's hyper-focused on threat. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. It thinks in black and white terms. It doesn't want anything to be gray at all. And then emotionally, you can imagine that survival brain makes people feel panicky, feel like a little obsessive and afraid of getting things wrong. And they don't feel calm and open to learning new things. They just want to get things over with. And people in survival brain also really don't like making mistakes, and they are afraid of looking stupid too. So students in survival brain don't want to be picked on. They don't want to raise their hand and ask questions and look stupid. And so these people are also filled with doubt about their own ability to learn stuff, and they're afraid that other people can see how stupid they really are. Now, it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact, because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense, because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus. You know, that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and he has to do it over and over again. Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high parts of that mountain. You can see the expanse of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention and putting effort into it, it's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that Sisyphus is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the more stressed you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock gets, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker. Now, the kicker is that for traumatized people, stress is a really rigid and intense thing. And so with trauma, any little stress makes that rock grow way bigger than it normally would. And because people with trauma misperceive ambiguous situations as threatening and stressful, that rock just stays big all the time. Now, the good news is that the more you control stress, well, the easier it is to be in learning brain, right? Because that rock is a lot smaller. And what I really want to highlight for teachers is that the best way to keep students in learning brain goes back to why I spent so much time talking about attachment. Students best learn when they feel like they're safe and supported by the adults around them. So it's kind of like a baby elephant. You know how like on those nature shows, the baby elephant is like playing with leaves or exploring a tree or something like that and having a lot of fun. And the only reason why they can do that is because there's a whole group of mama elephants around that baby protecting it and looking out for danger. So a kid with trauma or who's stuck in survival brain, it's kind of like that baby elephant who doesn't have protective adults around them. They can't play and learn because they're way too focused looking out for threat and danger. So this is why I really believe that the most important thing that schools need to focus on, way more important than any kind of techniques or curricula, is really whether or not they are creating that environment where students feel like they're surrounded by these big mama elephants who are going to protect them and watch out for them and make them safe. And when students have that, I bet you it unlocks their curiosity, their eagerness to learn and play as a way to learn. So I hope that's helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Thanks.
All right. So that's Dr. Jacob Ham. He's a psychologist and he has a lot of great, I think, videos for teachers online on YouTube. So there's a bunch of other ones that he has. He talks about being attuned, being ready to support students as an editor, as anyone working with individuals that have been trauma impacted. But what stood out to you all? What did anything kind of resonate? Did you hear anything that you were expecting to hear? Did you learn anything new? I'm going to open up the floor for a few people to share if you like.
All right, so Trent, I think that we were here and we were just sort of discussing, you know, we do that for our kids as much as we can. We are the elephants. I am an elephant, you know, kids might call me that too. But we need it as teachers. And like the thing about the rock, pushing the rock up the thing, like we were all just going, yes, we have that stress all the time. And we need it also. So like, it's great. You know, we can do this for kids definitely and be their mama elephants, but we need some mama elephants in administration too.
100% agree.
And I say this to you guys
Yeah.
every time here at Writers Matter. You guys are mama elephants and we appreciate it.
What about the dad?
Yeah, what is
And what happened to dad elephants? Don't they have?
You know, that's a whole nother issue, but
You know, dads
know,
eat their young, so let's
videos
welcome
on our-
dads into the picture.
no, but I appreciate that. And I totally agree. And this is, you know, this is our attempt to do that as much as possible. Obviously, we're not, you know, in your buildings. We can't, you know, I wish we could have all your administrators in here as well, but this is an attempt to be intentional about creating a space for you all to come to after you do the things that you do, and to continue to hopefully reinforce what you're doing and give you more ideas and support. But yeah, Maureen, I see your hands up too.
Hi, something that stuck out to me was that I do believe that we as teachers, this is where we know the kids are and what we need to do and what is most important. And, you know, maybe it's administrators. I think it goes higher than that. But I mean, I just feel like it's so disheartening that we came back in August and here it is. It's like the first time that we're all gathering, not on Zoom as a faculty, right? In years that we're actually like all in the same room to kickstart a year. We haven't done it in 3 years. And then it's like, we're talking about the PSSA data like on the first day. And it's just, I don't know, like, I don't know where that disconnect is. I mean, it's the people who are around children and the people who aren't, I guess. But I just don't know how to reconcile that, I guess.
I can definitely snap to that. I definitely, you know, again, we're going to try to show how PDE is trying to do things, and we're going to talk about how to advocate and create some space, hopefully in these meetings every month, to be able to at least come together as a group and see if we can brainstorm ways to be able to kind of push back against, you know, what we see. Unfortunately, the practices that we want to hopefully change and advocate for our students for. So we're gonna try our best here to be able to provide that space, but we know that's not enough. But hopefully, it can be something that can help throughout the year, because it's definitely needed. You're absolutely right. Anyone else? All right, so again, this is actually a screenshot from a document from PDE, but it really just highlights what we've already been talking about. So I know this is something that they've been working on. They've had working groups for the past several years of coming out with trauma-informed practices for schools. But we at least at Writers Matter, we've been talking about the 6 core values, because we talked about safety, like I mentioned earlier. We talked about empowerment, voice, and choice. These are just best practices that have existed really in this format since 2014. That was created by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration to talk about really trauma-informed practices in general. And that goes really hand in hand with most resources that you see talking about trauma-informed schools as well. So I just wanted to show this. I mean, it's there, but again, it doesn't hold the same weight as standardized testing, doesn't hold the same weight as all the other million things that I'm sure that are getting the priority at your school. But it does exist. And we're going to hopefully use this as an anchor to push back if we need to, like we've tried to do in the past years too as well, when communicating with your leaders. But just so that you're aware, in case you have not seen it, the 6 principles of trauma-informed approach are safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, cultural, historical, and gender issues. And that last bullet point, without much context, might not be super helpful, but really it's looking at being aware of the historical and cultural and gender, really like, you know, offenses and potential things that people have had to deal with and people have had to endure based on how they identify, based on their backgrounds, based on their histories, based on sometimes it's where you live, where you go to school. So it's really being aware that it's not, again, pushing back on the idea that it's just the person or the town or the city or whatever, but understanding that there is a greater narrative and a greater context that can contribute to why we're seeing what we see or why you experience what you experience when working with individuals that have experienced trauma. So we have a video that actually breaks this down, breaks each one of these points down. If you're really into this and you want to learn more about it, we can share that with you. It'll be a part of our resources, but that's just so you can have an idea of what kind of the six principles are. We focus a lot on safety. We also hope that we can do this for you all too as much as possible. Have peer support with each other, have some collaboration, empower you all, and provide voice as much as we can through Writers Matter as you do the same thing with your students. So we're going to talk about some topics. I'm just going to skim through this really quickly because I think it's not quite as important as what we're going to do next, but we're focusing today on taking care of yourself. We asked you to write down 10 things that you enjoy doing at the start. So if you came in a little bit later, you can still do that right now. Just write down 10 things that you enjoy doing in general. It could be anything. We're going to talk about communicating our needs to administrators, not in a way that's belittling what you already know how to do and belittling what the real barriers, but really trying to make sure that we have like a game plan and an action plan to support you all as you're trying to implement Writers Matter. And we know that this has come up the last few years where there's been a lot of pushback because of the focus on academics. Really, it sounds funny even saying that, but the focus on standards and the focus on what the state is looking for, really, less than like this academics, because we're providing that with Writers Matter. But we're going to talk about finding resources and provide you with as much resources as we can as you continue to manage this year and things that come up with it. Find ways to enjoy what we're doing intentionally. Try to differentiate between major fires and daily sparks. This is kind of like what we talked about several times. I think maybe a year or two ago when talking about how to manage behaviors during writing groups and during our writing centers. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Talk about being prepared to work with different things you might see, and having some structures you can rely on if you don't already have them. But this includes teaching and also includes this kind of like what we're doing now, but building community with your peers. So that way, hopefully no one feels like they're alone in the work that we're doing in Writers Matter and just in general in teaching. All right, so we're going to break out into breakout rooms again in a second, and we're going to ask you to, we can talk about kind of what we just shared the last few minutes, but I want you to think about why you're in your role. So similar to the Where I'm Froms that we did the first month or in September, once you want to think about why are you in your role? Why are you teaching? We know all these different things are happening. We know all the different stressors and the different ways we don't get supported or heard at a bigger sense, right? Like from people that are not working with children, that are making the decisions. With all that said, we're all still in our roles as educators. So I want you to think about why you are in your role and describe it in a way that can be, you can draw a picture, you can find lyrics to a song, you can create a poem. It can be whatever you want it to do. You can just write down some bullet points, but try to be as creative as you possibly can be right now on a Wednesday at almost 5:53. So try to be creative and talk about why you are in your role. And then we're going to share with our group. So we're going to give you about like 5 to 7 minutes to work on it.
I
And
think we
then
have 3
share.
minutes, Trent.
Oh, yeah, 3 minutes. Say it again.
They're going to have about 2 to 3 minutes to work in their groups because we're just about at time.
We're closing at 6, not 6:30.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
actually, let's do that now without the breakout rooms. My fault on that, Kim. I got my time messed up. But
Okay.
think about why you're in your role, or why do you teach? Why are you in your role? And try to think of a creative way that you can share. So let's just take a minute and do that. All right, so not a lot of time, not enough time to do that. But I'll just share my example real quick of something that I think about often, and it's a line. As you all know, I am a fan of hip hop. I'm not on Andre's level. I'm not an artist myself, right? But I do love hip hop culture and I love rap music. So a line that I often think about is Jay-Z. He says, "I do this for my culture, And he says to let them know what a brother looks like when a brother's in a roaster, show them how to move in a room full of vultures. The industry is shady, it needs to be taken over. So I often think about that in education, where I feel like we've talked about the issues in education. We need to take over. We need more representation of different people and backgrounds. So that's why I do what I do. And I try to keep that in mind as I encounter all these roadblocks that we encounter. So just an example. Hopefully you can think of yours and we can come back and check on that next week. But as we close out, the thing that we like you to do with that list of 10 that you had is to go back and really like star and highlight things that you're still finding or have time to do. We know realistically time is tight and tough, and there's a lot, I'm sure, responsibilities we have in school and outside, but try to identify if you're doing at least 5 of those 10 things, or circle 5 of those 10 things that you still have time to do. So let's take a minute to do that. All right, again, hope not a ton of time, but you have this list. You can always go back to it and really reflect and make sure that you're still doing these things, or hopefully going back to it. I realize I'm not going to brunch like I would have or have been in my summertime before school started. So I'm gonna try to incorporate that and bring that back when I can on one of these weekends, because that's one of my top things that I've not done since school started. So as you go back, look at your highlights and your stars, or however you coded it, but how do you feel about it? Do you need to change it? Do you need to add it? Do you need to make sure that you're bringing some things back to the forefront that you like to do? And if you can, find an accountability partner, ideally at your school, and really check in with them before we have our next PD next month. So have at least one check-in over the next 3-4 weeks. This is just to make sure, share your list and share your top 5 things, and have a partner that can check in on you to make sure that you're doing the things that you enjoy doing. So as you're grading and staying up late and lesson planning and everything, have someone that can check on you and make sure that you're still watching whatever show you watch, or going on walks, or reading your books, or going to the beach on the weekend, whatever it is that you need to do. Work together to be able to hopefully do these things and also keep each other accountable. And we'll check back and see how we're doing with that next time we meet. So we don't have a ton of time to do this. I'm gonna jump to, I'll let you close out, Kim, and we can.
Yeah, let's skip over this one. We'll go to that one next week. But just back real quick. So one of the other activities, trying to think about, self-care and practices that help us feel good about ourselves, is in the purple book, the supplemental book that is online, and all of you should have one copy of it. You might want to look at the best part of me activity, where the students identify a physical feature, their hands, their feet, their smile, any part about them, and they write a descriptive essay or poem about why that's their best part of them. There's a great book called The Best Part of Me that is filled with a bunch of different examples. And I have to give credit to Kellyanne for this. I have the book right here as we speak. And so within that book, you'll see all kinds of examples of children's pictures, and then they're writing about their best part of me. And so you can really use a variety. On this page, it talks about going online and just Googling. There's all kinds of examples. And really the only thing that you need to do is help them take a picture of their best part of me and print it out, and then use that as a way for them to draw on the writing. Also, the suggestion is to use the song Beautiful by Christina Aguilera, which has them really think about, the good qualities of themselves. And so sometimes this is a nice transition from an I am from, because sometimes I am froms can get a little bit negative, right? Oftentimes we think about some of the negative things in our lives that we're from, and this gives you an opportunity for them to really highlight some things that make them special and unique. And, obviously makes for some great displays and things like that to open up. So, this is a wonderful activity that can be trauma informed with our students. And so I see that we are at 6:01 and want to be cognizant of our time. So please know that our next meeting is on November 9th, and we will once again meet on Zoom. Our plan is to have an in-person meeting for our final meeting of 22 on December 7th. We would love to invite you all to LaSalle and have a meal together. And so, try to put that on your calendar and see if it would work for you to be able to attend. We could also look at potentially having a Zoom link for those of you that can't, but we'd really like it to be more celebratory and social, and an opportunity for us to come together and be together and not just talk about PSSA scores and things of that nature. So more to come on that when we meet next month, but please save the date for both of those. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to hang on with us as others get off, but otherwise we will be in touch. I did put the link for the teacher leaders report, but I'll be sending out an email as well. And we hope to start getting out to some of your schools as well. So we'll be in touch with you in that regard, and Leslie will be in touch with you about our assessment. So, thank you again. We appreciate the time that you give us each month when you have so many other things to do, and are just so appreciative of the work that you do. So thank you all, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You as well. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.
Dr. Lewinsky.
Yes.
Hi, it's Maureen from Henry. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Maureen?
I'm good. I was just gonna, I did a project with last year, reading the best part of me, and I just wanted to drop the link in the chat for so you could look at it.
That would be awesome. Would you even be willing to share some of that you did with the group next month if you're able to attend?
Yeah, it was last year that I did it, but
Oh, that's okay. No, because I think, especially for our new teachers, like being able to see and hear through some of these lessons and stuff. So I will definitely look at the link that you sent, but if you would be willing to share that next month, that would be awesome.
it was because I also had the Picasso project in my classroom. So like I did it as a everything.
Yeah,
With
like put in
collaboration, every collaboration. So on that slide I'm sending you, like I had 2 different projects that I did with them. The second one is the best part of me. So you can just sort of flip through.
Okay.
And see what we did.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
We read the book and everything, and it was great.
Well, yeah. So if you would want to talk through that for everybody, I think that would be really helpful. So
okay.
And also, Maureen, next Thursday, right? Next Thursday
Yes.
at 5?
It's on my calendar.
All right, and that's a
I'm
perfect
sorry,
segue.
Trent, I've been so
That's
like
all right.
bad about responding.
No, we're all trying our hardest, but it's going to happen. And this is a perfect example of why it's going to be great to have you to work with you and Aubrey, because we can incorporate this into our next piece. Awesome.
Definitely.
And I will tell you that the 5th grade novel is great for I Am From this year. I moved to 5th grade this year, so it's all new stuff for me. So
what novel are you using?
I feel like this is an academic way to get it in.
Nice.
I say that loosely. You know how I feel about it. Okay.
Thanks,
Good
Maureen.
night. Good night.
So already.
Yeah.
Night.
Hey, Kim, you're still recording too, just so you know.
Thanks.